Like you're focused on the day-to-day, you're focused on the team, you're focused on growing. And suddenly one day, probably someone from outside tells you, guys, what you're building is enormous, no?
There are things that you can do to try to help people along the way around providing access to capital like you guys are doing, right? We want to make money in business, but we also want to make people's lives better. You know, it's much better to sell too early than too late.
To change the way that people buy houses, to change the way that houses are built, to change the way they are commercialized, they are treated, there is an enormous opportunities on rent.
That house, you know, other than the family itself, the house is the most important thing in your life. The thing you're working on is the most important thing in your customer's life.
Hoy tenemos con nosotros a Enrique Linares, cofundador del primer unicornio español, inversor, advisor, consejero nuestro, y a Benjamin Hellweg. Es el fundador de la mayor compañía de Estados Unidos, quizás del mundo, de Rent to Buy, es lo mismo que hacemos nosotros, que se ha unido a Living como inversor y advisor. Yo cuando hablé con él le dije una cosa, has conseguido hacer la mayor compañía de Estados Unidos, ayúdanos a nosotros a hacer la mayor compañía de Europa. Me dijo, tiene totalmente sentido, let's go for it. So, tenemos el gran honor de tener a dos grandes emprendedores con nosotros que han conseguido llevar su compañía desde cero a valoraciones estratosféricas. Así que nada, vamos a aprender de ellos y a disfrutar de una conversación.
Basically, the first question would be, what or how was that moment when you realized Home Partners and Letgo was going to become a game changer?
Well, honestly, you don't really notice, right? Like you're focused on the day-to-day, you're focused on the team, you're focused on growing. And suddenly one day, probably someone from outside tells you, guys, what you're building is enormous, no? And you start thinking about it. And you think about how money is impact, and you think about how the company starts to grow organically, and how much noise you make on the ecosystem, and how many people is benefit from what you do. There is a moment where you say, "Wow, this is going to be really big," which is fantastic. Man. You enjoy a lot, but at the end, the day after, nothing changed. You keep focused on the same task and solving problems, and very much on the day-to-day.
Okay, and for you, Ben, when was that moment?
So for us, I think it's a little bit different because real estate is so capital intensive. For me, it was really, the day we completed our first institutional fundraise in 2014. It was about $500 million of capital that we, raised to go into buying houses, and that was the day I knew we were a real business. That was the day I knew we were going to make it. And, yes, you go back the next day and work like hell to help your customers and to help your employees and to help your investors. But, it was like a really concrete day where I realized that we were going to be in business for a long time.
And what do you think were the top maybe 3 key decisions that drove success for Home Partners of America? And then for you, Enrique.
So, look, the good news is when you're building a business, you can reverse things when you make a mistake. So I think one thing is to be really flexible. So I don't know that there's 3 individual decisions that really drive whether you're successful or not, but I think it's really, for us, I think it was, making sure we focus on the consumer, delivering the best value that we possibly can, because that helps us help more consumers, but it also helps us, be a strong business. I really think about, we had kind of 3 constituencies. We had our consumers, we had our employees, and we had our investors. And we had to try to make all of them happy at the same time. Now, in some ways, there's a little bit of conflict between the three groups. So we had to keep all three satisfied, because you can't make all three really happy, but really keeping those three groups balanced and making sure that you provide a really good value proposition for all three. That's what keeps the business alive, and that's what grows the business for the long term.
I will say I think there were 4 things that were critical for us. The first one I would say is that we were born international. I mean, especially if you are based in Spain, if your office at that time was in Barcelona, I mean, you need to think global, right? Because, the market is very big. There are multiple markets. Probably there are many people around the world doing the same thing that you are doing. If you are born with an international mindset and from day one you think on other markets and how to operate and expand internationally, that helps you a lot. In our case, maybe it was too much. We launched in 17 countries at the same time. But that helped us to find the 2 best possible countries to operate at that time, no? With a model like Letgo. The second one I will say is that we spent so much time on talent, so many hours recruiting, looking for senior people and the best possible senior people and import talent. In only 1 year, we had 17 different nationalities. That's something that Barcelona promotes a lot because it's a destination where everybody wants to live and you have lots of international people, but also help us to have a different mindset and to think really global. No? There was a third one that is data-driven. Like when you operate in more than one market, then intuition doesn't work. Then you really need to take decisions with our data and transmit that to the whole company so that everybody thinks on numbers. And the fourth one, I will say, was to innovate. And when we talk about the startups, many times everybody talks about innovation and technology, but there are other ways to innovate. You can innovate with marketing. You can innovate on how you treat your customers. You can innovate. And we were completely obsessed on doing things different than the rest of the people.
So everyone, obviously, when you hear a success story from someone that has done what you guys have built, everyone thinks the road or the journey is full of making the right decisions, no? But what would you say what lesson basically have you had throughout the journey of making maybe a mistake that you had to fix along the way?
So I'm going to jump in and actually kind of agree with something Enrique said. I think having the right people is really, really critical.
Okay.
And, when you hire the wrong person, it's very expensive. And it's very, letting someone go is really hard and it's really painful. But when you hire the wrong person, you have to either move them to the right job or move them out. And, nobody hires perfectly. So I think we've all had, mistakes in our hiring, but, making sure that you have the right team in place and having the right person in place, it's just, you can't survive and you can't grow without the right team.
The right team.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I was going to mention something similar, it's very hard to get rid of some people, but the sooner you do it, there are some tough decisions that you need to take, right? And I remember at the very beginning, it was very hard for me, because, you want to make something big and you have so many things to do that you postpone the hard decisions, right? But one day it's you learn that those are the first things that you have to do. No?
Yeah, because it got harder
and bigger
when you do it later.
And that's a good learning that I made by making mistakes. No? And the second is, we as a founder or manager of a company, you need to have some fun. No? You really need to enjoy the process. And to do it, you should not see mistakes as mistakes. It's okay, you are doing so many things every week that, of course, you fail on some of them. No? And the point here is you need to recognize that you make a mistake and fix it and change it. And that's completely fine. No? The real mistake is when you don't act or you don't react and you leave that thing become very big. No?
Yeah. Let me go some step back to understand a little bit better about your stories. I think that to all the people understand what you do or what you are, who you are, I think that I would like to understand how you build home partner of America, and how you find out to sell the company for a big amount of money to Blackstone, Blackstone, right? And the same with you, no? We can start with you, Enrique. Go ahead.
I mean, in our case, I mean, it was 2014. That's 4 years after the iPad was born and 6 years after the iPhone was born. So now everybody talks about AI, right? Which is super relevant. It's going to change the world. But at that time, what was going to change the world was the apps, no? And how to make the user experience in a screen this size similar to a screen this size, right? So we dedicate a lot of time to analyze what functionalities you have in an app that you don't have in a desktop. And you have the camera, you have the chat, you have your location, you have lots of different things that now we're used to 10 years later, but at that time it was pretty new. And we understood that for classifieds, that's going to be completely different. It's going to change the market. So we decided that we want to disrupt classifieds by creating an app only app to buy and sell secondhand things. And as I said, there are two things that completely make a difference. One is that when we start the business, we analyze the world, complete world, every country. We look at the penetration of smartphones, GDP, if there was classifieds, if they have an app, how they do marketing. And with that, we found that 17 countries were more attractive than the rest. So we invest $500 a day on each one of those 17 countries with an MVP that was horrible. I mean, it was a big surprise that people use it. But they use it. They use it very much. And in fact, in 10 of those 17 countries, the retention was very high. They start posting things like crazy, lots of conversations. They grew super fast compared to the other 7. So we closed 7 of those countries. We keep with 10. A few months later, we closed 5. And at the end, it was US and Turkey. And Turkey was a fantastic story. It was not very well perceived to buy and sell secondhand things. There was a religious, cultural thing. People give things that they don't use as a present to other people, but they don't sell it. And we focus on people within 17 and 25 years, young people. And we communicate them that they could make money selling the things that they don't use. They completely understand. Arrive home with that money. And what happens when you have a teenager as a son and he arrives home with the money, right? You ask. And when the answer was Letgo. And so Turkish adults start to download Letgo and use it heavily. We changed the mindset of the country. For many years to buy and sell secondhand things in Turkey, they use Letgo as a verb, and now is one of the main destination to buy and sell secondhand cars. And in the US, we were very big on the East Coast. Big surprise. In 2017, we did a round that made us the first unicorn venture in Spain. And with that money, we opened the office in New York. It was sales, marketing, trust and safety, and a few more people. But when we arrived, there were many competitors. There were like 6 competitors. So we had to innovate. It was very hard. We tried everything from newspaper to radio we tried to create communities. We tried lots of different things. And we found that TV could work. No? So we worked with our agency, CPV in Miami. They built a fantastic TV campaign. We decided to do a national TV campaign, not start city by city, which was very aggressive at that time. But we also felt that the opportunity worldwide, and it was an enormous success. I mean, from nobody knowing you to I remember when I arrived to JFK and I told the policeman at the border that I was an entrepreneur. My company was Letgo. He was Letgo. Post-chat sell Letgo, which was the claim of the advertisement. The advertisement, particularly commercial.
How much money did you raise to do this type of campaign?
It's not public, so probably the lawyers maybe they can.
Okay, a lot of money.
No, but it's tens of millions of dollars. Yeah, but worldwide, it completely changed. I mean, it helped us a lot to sell, to reach agreements with car dealers so that they use Letgo. And it helped us to hire very good talent, and it put us on as a big player on the market to a point where at the end it was just OfferUp and us. We compete for 3 years. We had a couple of we tried to merge for a few times, And the third was the right one. In 2020, we merged our companies.
The campaign was the one with Breaking Bad?
Yeah, that's a fantastic story. That's a fantastic story.
Good,
Yeah.
good.
Let us know.
Okay, I mean, we our target public was young people, right? So Breaking Bad was the main show on TV at that time. So we talked with them and we asked them. I mean, we tried to do something together with Breaking Bad to put both brands together and create a lot of noise. So basically, they told us that the first commercial of Breaking Bad was going to be in a desert in Arkansas. So we record our commercial in the same desert. So when the commercials arrive, like people stand up, they go to the kitchen, bathroom, whatever, and one commercial, two commercial, third commercial, same desert. So people run to the sofa, they sit to continue to see Breaking Bad on the premiere. And suddenly there was a commercial of a guy in a van that was going down a hill, and it was Letgo, and everybody was shocked. I mean, we make so much noise on social networks, like on everywhere, and that also gave us a fresh image as a brand. It was very, very successful.
Nice.
So, yeah, I mean, really, we started in 2011, which was the depth of the mortgage crisis in the U.S. And the reason we started the business was the mortgage market wasn't working. A lot of people were losing their homes in the U.S. and I think all around the world. And, it was a really big market. And so we thought that if we could find a solution, it would be a really big opportunity for us. And, the other thing I think that was really compelling and for me, and it gave great clarity was, the demographics in the U.S. were really favorable. So there was going to be, real demand for housing, right? People need a place to live. And there was no new housing being built and people couldn't access homes. So I think it was really clear that this was going to be a big opportunity. And we looked at ways to try to lend money to people to buy houses and found that regulation was a big obstacle there. And so we settled on trying to be a landlord, thinking through how to acquire houses and rent them to people. We felt like we wanted to be partnered with our consumers and empower them to find a home they wanted to live in because, I think people are going to know much better where they want to live than we would. And so that really kind of set us off on that journey.
And how was the journey of raising capital? Can you talk a little bit about how much capital you've had to raise in order to become what Home Partners is today?
Sure. So, initially we had about $75 million led by a family office and a mortgage fund controlled by Lurinary. That allowed us to get in the game. I think one really important thing is when you're starting a business, find a way to get in the game because, if you're not in the game, you're not in the game. And when you're in the game, you might lose, but you got a chance. So that allowed us to get in the game, to do some transactions, to show that the business was viable. I think the conversations with investors were totally different when we had even 10 houses than when we had 0.
Yeah.
And so, that gave us proof of concept. Now, it took us 2 years to raise, the $500 million led by BlackRock. But, you need a lot of capital to buy a lot of houses. And so, we raised that money. We put that money to work relatively quickly. Our existing investors then backed us again. So we raised another $250 million from that group, put that money to work. Then we raised another $400 million of equity from a combination of some new investors and some of our existing investors. So kept growing the business. So that was almost a little bit over $1 billion on balance sheet. We then raised another $750 million of outside equity just to buy houses. before COVID hit. The good news is raising more money got easier as we delivered. So, we told people we were going to buy houses, we were going to rent them at a cap rate that was acceptable and attractive. We did that. People said, "Hey, you did what you said you were going to do," and we said, "Well, we want to do more," and they said, "That works for me." And I think it's really, doing what you tell people you're going to do is really important. And if you deliver, then those investors are going to deliver for you and come back to you. Because look, everybody wants things to be successful.
Yeah.
And when something doesn't go the way you want, I think it's important to be open and communicative, because not everything went the way we wanted. Sometimes we were growing slower than we wanted. Sometimes the market changed and the returns weren't quite what we expected in particular ways. But keeping the communication open, I think gave investors more confidence. So even when things didn't go as we had planned, people had the confidence to say, keep going, because it was still, good enough to meet their return targets, or, they had the confidence that the market was going to turn and come our way, based on the long-term thesis that we had about the need for housing.
Yeah.
You spoke about billions, a lot of money. How many families were you able to help with those billions?
So, Home Partners bought over 35,000 homes over its lifetime. And we had, I think, over 100,000 different tenants.
Wow.
Over the last 12 years.
That's amazing. That's 35,000 families being able to access housing. It's
yes. And
beautiful.
The funny thing is, housing, right? The market is so big, 35,000, and I don't want to minimize it, because for every one of those families, right, it's their home. But also there's 84 million housing units in the United States. So on the scale of the housing market, it's really small. But on the scale of that family that we helped, it's really big. And I think one of the things that, as we were growing, I had to remind my team and I had to remind myself is, I was dealing with dozens of houses every day, sometimes hundreds of houses every day. And so any given house was almost an afterthought at times. But for that family, right, that house, other than the family itself, the house is the most important thing in your life. And I had to remind myself, and I had to remind my team all the time, right? Thing you're working on is the most important thing in your customer's life.
Yep.
And it doesn't mean that you have to give them everything they ask for every time, but it does mean that you treat their concern with the respect and the gravity of something that's concerning the most important thing in their life.
Exactly. I mean, just to add, from our perspective at Living, we understand how it's changing people's lives when we hand in the keys. When that's the most emotional moment, and that's the most motivational moment, I think, throughout the whole journey since we built Living. And it's something that we like to share this with everyone at the team, so they can come and they can hand in the keys, because that's when you realize and when you see really how you're changing people's lives, no? When as you said, it's their most important thing in their life is their home. It's building their home. So we've spoke about all this amount of money that both of you raised and how big the companies have become thanks to you guys. What would be your advice for a founder that's about to go through selling their startup or negotiating a major milestone that's going to definitely be a life-changing moment or milestone for the company and for them?
the most important thing is to get in the game, and the most important thing is to, get deals done. So, I think if you're trying to monetize, I think it's important to run a process if that's an option. But you really, if you have a deal that works, that's better than no deal. And so, sometimes you're lucky and everybody wants to buy what you're selling, and you have great competition and you can get exactly the deal you want. But sometimes, that's not the case, and you need to make sure that you, keep the company safe and keep the company capitalized. And so, getting a deal done that's acceptable, is much better than not getting a deal done when you need to do it. So I think just being commercial and being, aware of the situation, it's much better to sell too early than too late.
I would like to ask you about how you feel the day after the exit.
Yeah, after the major final
Yeah.
round.
So, you know what? I saw this question when you kind of wanted to say about this, and to me, it was really contento more than because you asked, does money make you happy? And so I think, I don't know, when you have a family, for me, I think about the big things is, right, you want to own the house of your dreams. And in the U.S., you have to worry about, like, how do I pay for the kids to go to college? I know in Europe it's free, so it's not as big a problem. But you still want to own the home of your dreams here.
Yes.
Right? And so for me, I felt really content, not because there was money in the bank, but because, owning the home of our dreams and paying for the kids' college was not going to be a problem anymore. And that's like, if you're like trying to take care of your family, that's a lot of stress that's gone.
Yeah.
I think, I think money, it can make you content because it can take a lot of risk and stress off the table. I don't think it can ever make you happy, right? If you are motivated by having the most money, I have bad news, because there's always going to be someone that has more money, and there's always going to be more money that you don't have. And so I think that's a recipe to be pretty unhappy.
I mean, the day that you sell your company is a mix of feelings. So I remember I was very, 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 very excited and happy. But at the same time, I remember that it happened, and we signed like on a Friday, and on a Monday we were locked down with COVID. So I had to communicate to the team on a screen on a goal to resell the company that we merged. And I think what came out to me was be humble, like super humble, because at the end, that's the team that you have been working with for so many years, that you know very well, that you create, that the values and the culture of the company is an evolution of how you are, right? Your personality. And suddenly, this is the end of the story. We arrive, right? And this happens here. So it's kind of a very strange moment that, of course, is fantastic. I recommend everyone. but this, what I will say, is not what I expected that will happen. No? And going back to the second question, the one about money, that if money brings happiness, right? I'm very aligned with him. No, like it brings freedom, and it takes stress. But there's no purpose on that. No, at the end, you are you need to find what you want to do, and you need to do something. You need to do some things, right? And you need to find what it is. To know that you want to be an entrepreneur and to know that you want to build a company is much easier, because probably something that you have inside yourself since you finish your studies, right? But what to do once you create something very big, knowing that the probabilities that you build something as big as the previous one are super low, that's a challenge. In my case, it happened 4 or 5 years ago. I have to say it has been the best years of my life. I mean, I decided to do it in the no, but because I dedicate time to think, I dedicate time to help people, I dedicate time to do the things I wanted to do that I could never do, to spend time with my family, and it has been a lot of enrichment and clarity. And as you know, the end of that process was to build a venture capital. That, by the way, is something that I mean, if you told me the day I sold Letgo, you're going to become an investor and build a venture capital, I would say, that's the last thing I'm going to do in my life. That's absolutely impossible. I suffer a lot with investors. I don't want to do the same thing to other people, no? But at the end, life surprises you. And at the same time, as entrepreneurs, I want to innovate, right? I want to create a different way to invest and a different way to support entrepreneurs, and to join them on their journey and try to help them as much as possible.
Let's move into speaking a little bit about housing. No,
Yeah.
I think that's a very important topic. It's something that in Spain, in Europe, is going to be one of the. It's already being one of the biggest topics. That needs a solution, no? Spain has a huge crisis in housing. And I'd like to know, maybe we start with you, Ben, what do you see what do you think it's going to happen in the next 5 years in the housing market?
So, look, it's very difficult to predict the future.
And very open question, no? So it's, okay. Let's try let's try to answer.
Look, it like I said, it's really difficult to predict the future. I do think, right, if you're not building any housing, but there's demand for housing, there's really only one thing that can happen, which is housing is going to get more expensive.
Yeah.
Right? There are things that you can do to try to help people along the way around providing access to capital, like you guys are doing, right? And that can be very valuable. I know there are government programs to help support access to housing for government workers or essential workers. The problem with those type of programs, they help those people, but they distort what's happening in the market. And so they create an even bigger shortage for everyone else. And so, long term, the only way to solve a crisis of too much demand for housing is to build more housing and create a supply of housing, right? That's fundamentally the only way that you can balance the demand. But on the way, absent building housing, right? Finding ways to unlock access to capital for people. I think that's really the one tool, the one lever that we have in the business world, in the entrepreneurial world, to help address that challenge. So, I think you're in the right place.
Yeah.
And it's not easy, but it's a big opportunity. And obviously, I think the problem's going to get worse before it gets better.
Okay. And Enrique, in your new venture capital, you're also focusing on housing. What's your view on this?
So one of the areas where we invest on the venture capital is crop tech. I mean, we think there is an enormous opportunity there. I mean, we, as you said, we see an opportunity to change the way that people buy houses, to change the way that houses are built, to change the way they are commercialized, they are treated. There is an enormous opportunities on rent. And we want to support that. No? We also think that even real estate is so traditional, the impact of artificial intelligence is going to be huge. How we look at risk, how we do the maintenance, how we look at different profiles of tenants, and we like very much the category. Also, it's a big business in the south of Europe, and there are very smart people on the category on real estate. And we want to support them and to make sure that technology is close to them and to give better access to the population to their houses.
Okay. So we met both of you actually through LinkedIn.
It's true.
It's true, yes. A few years ago already that we got already in touch, with Enrique a lot more often because you joined us a few years ago already, like
4 years ago.
4 years ago.
4 years ago already. Wow. Time flies. And you've been helping us with a lot of advice and support for us as founders, which was it was amazing. Where do you see, or where would you like to see living in the next few years?
I mean, I love living. I love the concept. I think that this is something smart. I mean, there are some things that are super clear, right? There is a problem there. It doesn't make sense for most of people to pay a rent, but sometimes it's the only thing you can do, right? And at the end, what you are doing with living is bringing freedom to the market, bringing freedom to the people that they want to buy a house and they cannot do it, right? And facilitate that process. I think there is of course, this is a business. We all want to make money out of living. We want living to be as big as possible and as successful as possible. But there is also another part, is the social part, like how many people benefits from what living does, no? How many young people has access to their first house, no? And that is super relevant for me. Also, when we met 4 years ago, I meet you guys. I start helping you, not being an investor, just spending some time supporting the team, supporting you. And what I saw, I like it very much. I mean, I saw a lot of resilience, a lot of ambition, and that there was a deep reason why you are building living, and it's to change society and to have an impact, no? And I felt that was a great opportunity to support, and I try to help you on everything I could until now.
Thank you, Enrique.
And you've done a great job. And Ben, we got in touch with you also, I'd say 2 years and a half
3 years ago, yeah.
Through LinkedIn. You were so kind to message us back. We were like, wow. Because, I mean, we've always seen Home Partners of America. It's the leading company worldwide. And, well, the fact that you just joined us as an advisor for us is super valuable. Where would you like to see Living in the next few years?
Look, I want to see Living help a lot of people get into great homes, right? I think, look, it's like Enrique said, right? We're a business, right? You're a business, and you need to make money, and there's no shame in that, right? It's really important to make money, right? Because if you can make money by helping people get into housing, you get to do a lot of it, right? And so to me, I want to see us get a lot of people into great homes. And I think it's, I think it's a really powerful motivator, for us, for you guys, but I think your whole team. And as you grow the business, when you bring on more people, right? I think there's a big desire among a really broad part of the population that they want to have work that's, I mean, yes, they want to get paid and they want to do a good job, but they also want, I think people get a lot of satisfaction and validation from doing a job that's making society better, from doing a job that's, helping people get into a home. And again, right, when you think about home, right, that's so visceral, that's so emotional, that's so, right, like that's where you go for comfort and shelter. So it's such an important part of people's lives. And so to be able to impact that in a positive way for a lot of people, I think it's, yes, we want to make money in business, but we also want to make people's lives better. And this is, the this is an opportunity to both,
make
to
a
both
great
of those.
So, and thank you so much for supporting Living and our purpose, to help people be able to access homeownership. As today, young people, we have a huge issue here in Spain accessing homeownership. Basically, we're left out of accessing financing to be able to buy our houses. And by buying a house, it's how you can build your economic growth. It's how you can build wealth. For example, today in Spain, I think it's 93% of wealth in the country is held by those over 40 years old. And those below that age, we're the poorest generation ever. So basically, we're here as a company to support and to make young people be able to grow economically. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast, and we'll see you soon.